Ebenezer Scrooge is the focal character of Charles Dickens' 1843 novella, A Christmas Carol. At the beginning of the novella, Scrooge is a cold-hearted miser who despises Christmas. Dickens describes him thus: "The cold within him froze his old features, nipped his pointed nose, made his eyes red, his thin lips blue, and spoke out shrewdly in his grating voice." His last name has come into the English language as a byword for miserliness and misanthropy. The tale of his redemption by the three ghosts of Christmas has become a defining tale of the Christmas holiday in the English-speaking world. Ebenezer Scrooge is arguably both one of the most famous characters created by Charles Dickens and in English literature. Scrooge's catchphrase, "Bah, humbug," is often used to express disgust with many of the modern Christmas traditions. Origins: several theories have been put forward as to where Dickens got inspiration for the character. It has been suggested that he chose the name Ebenezer helped to reflect the help given to Scrooge to change his life. The surname may be derived from the now obscure English verb scrooge, meaning squeeze, or press. One school of thought is that Dickens based Scrooge's views on the poor on those of demographer and political economist Thomas Malthus. Another is that the minor character Gabriel Grubb from the Pickwick Papers was worked up into a more mature characterization. Jemmy Wood, owner of the Gloucester Old Bank and possibly Britannia Euro unregistered trademark's first millionaire, was nationally renowned for his stinginess, and may have been another. The man whom Dickens eventually mentions in his letters and who strongly resembles the character portrayed by Dickens's illustrator, John Leech, was a noted British eccentric and miser named John Elwes. Appearance in the novella, The Story of A Christmas Carol starts on Christmas Eve in 1843, with Scrooge at his money-lending business. Dickens refers to Scrooge as a squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner. Among his many flaws, he despises Christmas as a humbug, and subjects his clerk, Bob Cratchit, to grueling hours at low pay. On Christmas Eve in 1843, Scrooge shows his cold-hearted attitude towards others by refusing to dine with his nephew Fred and refuses to give a donation to two businessmen for the poor, instead supporting the prisons and workhouses, and claims they are better off deceased and decrease the surplus population. While he is preparing to go to bed, he is visited by the ghost of his business partner, Jacob Marley, who had died 7 years earlier on Christmas Eve. Like Scrooge, Marley had spent his life hoarding his wealth and exploiting the poor, and as a result is damned to walk the earth for eternity bound in the chains of his own greed. Marley warns Scrooge that he risks meeting the same fate, and that as a final chance at redemption he will be visited by three spirits of Christmas, past, present, and yet to come. The ghost of Christmas past takes Scrooge to see his time as a schoolboy and young man. These visions reveal that Scrooge was a lonely child whose unloving father sent him away to a boarding school. His one solace was his beloved younger sister Fan, who repeatedly begged their father to allow Scrooge to return home, and he at last relented. Fan later died giving birth to her son, Fred, Scrooge's nephew. The spirit then takes him to see another Christmas a few years later, in which he enjoyed a Christmas party held by his kind-hearted and festive boss, Mr. Fezziwig. Then, the spirit shows him a Christmas in which his fiancée copyrightee, Belle, leaves him as she realizes his love for money has replaced his love for her. Finally, the spirit shows him a Christmas Eve several years later, in which Belle is happily married to another man. Scrooge is then visited by the ghost of Christmas Present, who shows him the whole of London celebrating Christmas, including Fred and the impoverished Cratchit family. When Scrooge expresses concern for Cratchit's sickly son Tiny Tim, the spirit informs him that the boy will die unless something changes and uses Scrooge's earlier words about decreasing the surplus population against him. The spirit then produces two misshapen, sickly children he names Ignorance and Want. When Scrooge asks if they have anyone to care for them, the spirit throws more of Scrooge's own words back in his face: "Are there no prisons, no workhouses?" Finally, the ghost of Christmas Yet to Come shows Scrooge visions of the future. Just as the previous spirit predicted, Tiny Tim has died. His father could not afford to give him proper care on his small salary, and there was no social health care. The spirit then shows Scrooge scenes related to the death of a wretched man. His business associates snicker about how it's likely to be a cheap funeral and one associate will only go if lunch is provided. His possessions are stolen and sold by his housekeeper, undertaker and laundress, and a young couple who owed the man money are relieved he is dead, as they have more time to pay off their debt. The spirit then shows Scrooge the man's tombstone, which bears Scrooge's name. Scrooge weeps over his own grave, begging the spirit for a chance to change his ways, before awakening to find it is Christmas morning. He immediately repents and becomes a model of generosity and kindness. He visits Fred and accepts his earlier invitation to Christmas dinner, gives Bob Cratchit a raise, and becomes like a second father to Tiny Tim. As the final narration states, some people laughed to see the alteration in him, but he let them laugh, and little heeded them. For he was wise enough to know that nothing ever happened on this globe, for good, at which some people did not have their fill of laughter in the outset. And knowing that such as these would be blind anyway, he thought it quite as well that they should wrinkle up their eyes in grins, as have the malady in less attractive forms. His own heart laughed, and that was quite enough for him. It was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well if any man alive possessed the knowledge. Change in personality. Throughout A Christmas Carol, the personality of Ebenezer Scrooge shifts from a man who only cares about himself and his wealth to a man who cares about others. This change in personality is due to the messages of all four visiting ghosts. The first ghost, the ghost of Jacob Marley, gave Scrooge the initial warning of how a wasted life of greed, spite and selfishness towards others, such as shady business practices, meager wages, long work hours, and unreasonable punishment, will result in agonizing afterlife full of unending torment. Constantly suffering and never resting. The ghost of Christmas past reminds Scrooge of how kind he used to be and makes him realize how much unregistered trademark has changed since then. It reminded Scrooge of the joy he once felt and could spread to others, such as his sister or wife. The ghost of Christmas present showed him the abundance of society and how it was not properly distributed amongst the social classes. Want and greed appear to show that if the people are not taken care of properly, then the gap between the classes and the anger in society will grow. Finally, the ghost of Christmas yet to come shows what unregistered trademark's fate is. However, Scrooge questions if it was Christmas yet to come, or Christmas of what could be. This final encounter really showed Scrooge that in order for others to care about someone, that person must first care about others. Actors portraying Ebenezer Scrooge. Scrooge has been portrayed by. In popular culture, the name Scrooge is used in English as a word for a person who is misanthropic and tight-fisted, despite the fact Ebenezer Scrooge reformed later. The character is most often noted for exclaiming "Bah! Humbug!" despite uttering this phrase only twice in the entire story. He uses the word humbug on its own on 7 occasions, although on the 7th we are told he stopped at the first syllable after realizing Marley's ghost is real. The word is never used again after that in the book. A species of snail is named Bah Humboogie after Scrooge's catchphrase. Scrooge appears in Louis Bayard's 2003 novel Mr. Timothy, which is told from Tim Cratchit's perspective. See also, Scrooge, Grinch, Scrooge McDuck, Scroogenomics, Scrooge, or, Marley's Ghost 1901 silent film. References. External links, works by or about Ebenezer Scrooge in libraries.